President Donald Trump deployed 2,000 National Guardsmen to Los Angeles for riots that broke out after ICE officials started arresting those who are living in the U.S. illegally. The last time the National Guard was federalized in L.A. was in 1992, when protests erupted after a jury found 4 LAPD officers not guilty in the beating of Rodney King. The mayor of the city held a press conference a couple hours ago, and she said the chaos is being caused by the administration.
When you raid Home Depot and workplaces, when you tear parents and children apart, and when you run armored caravans through our streets, you cause fear and you cause panic.
And Forward Latino, a national nonprofit here in Wisconsin, is condemning the administration for using the National Guard. We talked with the president of that organization a few hours ago, and he told us that they are frustrated.
So we're seeing this huge operation that was done in a very militaristic fashion for effect, and in trying to provoke a crowd and trying to provoke a reaction, and they did.
Meanwhile, U.S. Senator Ron Johnson is comparing the riots in L.A. to the riots in Kenosha in 2020. He also criticized leaders in California for allowing this to happen in L.A.
This is all about protecting law enforcement as they go about their very difficult and very dangerous job. So I completely support President Trump in doing this because he does not have a partner in Governor Newsom or the mayor.
Now, Governor Gavin Newsom and President Trump did talk on the phone a couple days ago about the state of the city. These